man. Welcome, everybody, to the Real Sharks podcast. It is your host, of course, your movie guru, Rob, with his two fellow co-hosts, Steve and Luke.
Yo.
And we're talking to you live, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, on the only podcast that is the most cynical, critical movie podcast on the internet, the Real Sharks podcast. And make sure you check us out on Pod Nation TV. So, what's going on, guys, first of all?
Not much, man. Not much. What's going on with the rest of you guys?
Yeah, good. So for everyone out there who is just joining us or who has pretty much found us on those shorts that have been going around on YouTube, yes, we are the Real Sharks podcast.
The shorts?
And for everyone out there who has been with us for a long time, I just kind of wanted to say, thank you everyone for helping us grow and helping us get out there, past 3,000 subscribers on YouTube and pretty much making this show pretty well known all over the internet. So I can't even, we can't even begin to express the gratitude from our hearts. Some people may ask us too, like, why our shorts will come out sometimes before our episodes. We kind of experienced a long time doing this, and we've been doing it for a long time, that when we come out and say things, people copy, and the most best form of flattery is copying, but sometimes it gets pretty asinine when you're a small show and you see people higher up in the algorithm pretty much taking your ideas and taking your episodes and kind of running with them. So we really want to appreciate everyone out there for what you've done helping us put to the forefront. And the reason we put out our shorts so much from our older episodes and newer ones is because we really want our talking points to be out there. We really want our points to be out there and known in the movie world. So I just want to say we appreciate that, and that's why that happens sometimes. So we'll continue to put out content as best we can and continue making these episodes as best we can and look the best they can. So again, we appreciate it. Yep. All right. So let's get started on this topic. This is going to be a very heavy episode, our audience. So if you are very easily triggered by dramatic scenes of massacres and death, we really highly suggest you turn it off now, because this is going to be one of our heaviest episodes, because we're going to be talking about movies that depict genocide. Mm-hmm. That's right. Some of these films we've never really spoken about very much, and this is going to be some of the first time we've ever really spoken about them. So let's go ahead and really kind of kick it off. And there's really no way to start them off either heavy or light. So I'll kick it off with the most renowned one, you guys. And I think we should. This one we haven't talked about, or maybe we had in passing, but it was never. We never got a chance to really talk about, and that was Schindler's List. That's right. Let's see, 1993 Schindler's List. Am I correct, gentlemen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Directed by Steven Spielberg. Starred Liam Neeson. Pretty much a movie that depicts various stories and lives going on with the Holocaust. The story of Oskar Schindler, who was he arrives in Krakow in 1939, ready to make his fortune from World War II, which just started after joining the Nazi Party, primarily the Party for Expendency. His staff, his factory, his Jewish workers, pragmatic reasons. When the SS began exterminating Jews in the ghetto, Schindler arranges to have his workers protected to keep his factory in operation, but soon realizes that in so doing so, he is also saving innocent lives. That's the symphonis of the movie. But, we talked about this coming on air, me and Steve. This is a movie that he asked me. He said, Rob, did you watch Schindler's List before you came on? And I said, you know what? I don't have to, because I've seen that movie, I believe, two or three times, and that was enough to see it for me. It is by far one of the greatest films that depict this genre that we are discussing right now. It is such a raw movie, to the bare bones of that it is in black and white, and it only emphasizes color to really demonstrate brutality and focal point in the movie towards certain dramatic scenes. God, some of this, this movie stuck with me when the first time I saw it. to now. I mean, I don't need to really watch this movie too many times to really tell you about it, because it is a brutal film. Some the atrocities committed by the SS soldiers in the movies are just unforgettable. Some of the more I guess you could say lighthearted scenes are unforgettable too, such as when they try to shoot the worker in the head and all their guns jam. That was a pretty crazy scene. But I want to hear your guys' opinion. So, Luke, what do you think about Schindler's List? First of all,
Yeah,
Academy Award winning Best Picture. I might
award
add.
winning. Yeah, this is definitely this is something that I think Spielberg, has had a lot of affection for. And this is probably one of among his more personal films that he's ever made. Um, I watched it. I've watched it in high school. I remember, and it's one of those that like it's extremely an extremely heavy watch. Um, and in true Spielberg fashion, it is ultimately a story about hope. Um, despite the very horrific uh, circumstances and environment that it is. And some people have even criticized it for that. That the story is the focus on this one particular community that was saved when again, when so many people were not saved. Um, the It's hard for me to necessarily comment on it just because of like there's a what's the word? I would say that there is um a somberness. There's even perhaps even a reverence when trying to approach this particular film, because of the importance it has for so many people, particularly people, Jewish Americans and Jews on the whole. Um, it's or just anybody who is sensitive to these issues. So I think Spielberg put a lot of care, he put a lot of thought, and he put a lot of honesty into it. So, yeah, there's not much more I can really say other than that it is extremely, extremely good.
Right, one of the greatest films of all time.
Yeah.
Steve, how do you feel about Schindler's List?
I agree. Pretty much everything with Luke said. It's exactly my take. I feel like this is obviously one of the greatest films of all times, just because of the depiction of emotion that you get as watching it depict on film. It's one of the most rawest feelings you can probably get in cinema. Like if you kind of think about what a film is supposed to be about, right? And in all honesty, it's supposed to be about it's entertainment on a broad side, but it's also what you take from it. So what the film gives is one half, and then what the audience takes away from it. And like you were saying, Rob, like this is a film that is a certifiable classic, but it's not necessarily a sit down on a Saturday night and pop in Schindler's List thinking like it's going to be good. It's more of an experience, and I agree with Luke said. It's more of a culmination from Steven Spielberg because it was so personable, and he knew like I have to put everything I have into this one project because I cannot get this wrong in any orifice. And I don't think he did. I think that this depicts brutality in its rawest form. And it had to be, I mean, a lot of people who watch this film, they criticize, the only criticism I see is the length. But I'm like, you have to have it this length. It needs to be this. This isn't just a typical film. Again, it
needs to wear you out on the subject.
Right. Yeah. You need to understand it.
You need to understand.
You need to understand it. So, yeah.
So, speaking of understanding, here's a film that I recently saw when during getting ready for this project of ours. I actually saw Life is Beautiful, 1999's Life is Beautiful, which is a very interesting film. Gentle Jewish Italian waiter, Grado Officer, who is Robert Benini, I believe his name is, meets Dora, a pretty school teacher, and wins her over with his charm and humor. Eventually, they marry and have a son. Their happiness is abruptly halted, however, when Guado and Gaucher are separated from Dora and taken to concentration camps by Nazis. Determined to shelter his son from the horrors of surrounding, Guado convinces Glausu that their time in the camp is merely a game. This was a really interesting film. I don't know. Have you guys ever seen Life is Beautiful?
I seen it once.
I've heard of it. I'm aware of it.
Right. I was always just aware of this film because I do know, because Robert Benigni was the director. He won an award for this film.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time, it was released in 1998. At the time, it was huge. Like, he won the award, and I remember everyone was like, "This is one of the best films." You know, I watched it, and it really kind of reminded me of the film we've been kind of waiting to watch, which is the Day the Clown Cried, because it almost attempts in a way to make a Holocaust funny in a way. Like, how far can you make humor? Because throughout the film, he is trying to protect his son from the savage nature of what's going on, and he's playing, like, basically, you know, there's a scene like where the German officers are talking to him and having him translate, and he's making these translations like funny. So he's like, you know, they're telling him, like, you know, you can't whatever in German. He's like, they said that they've eaten all the lollipops and that none of you can have any. Like, you know, he's playing a game with the kids and with his son and trying to hide him in shelter. And it's one of the most lighthearted of all the films that we're going to cover here.
Yeah.
I do think it's a great film on its own. You know, it gets an 8.6 out of 10 on IMDb, which is well deserved. I mean, it's an original film that kind of plays out more into almost a contemporary play.
Yeah.
I feel like almost if you're watching it on stage. But you know, it is a great film. So that's going to be my little take on Life is Beautiful. So do you remember this film too, Steve, at all?
Yeah, I remember bits and pieces. I do remember the comedy part and exactly what you said of, like, it's definitely taking comedy from the aspects of, like, the darkest points that you can possibly imagine and making that kind of funny. It does test the boundaries of, like, is everything funny? Can everything be funny?
Right.
Kind of thing, even while it's happening. And yeah, and I felt that too. Like, when I first saw it, again, I only seen it once. Based off memory, I do feel like it was more of a cinematic, like, telling of a play. You know what I mean? It kind of felt play, but it was good. I felt like it was good, and it told the story it needed to.
We're gonna go across the world now and talk about this genre on another continent, starting with 2015's Beast of No Nation. This is kind of how Rob got his start in the movie critic world here, is because I started really kind of rawing this film because I actually, one of Netflix's first original films, I might add. Actually, it is their first original film they ever did.
Yeah.
Starring Idris Elba, Abraham Atta, Kurt Awagna, Jude, and I'm going to try and pronounce that. But this is by far Andre Alba, one of his greatest films he will ever do. Beast of No Nation, and I say this with full confidence, and I will say this to the day I die. This movie deserved to take home the Oscar over Revenant.
Yeah.
Ooh,
This film.
That's bull. I think that's not a hot take. I don't think that's
I don't think so.
A lot of people did. When I said it at the first
Yeah.
time I said this, people did think it was a hot take. But this film, and I said it to begin with too, it is not Andre Alba and this movie's fault that the Oscars did not give it to Leonardo DiCaprio sooner. It was a victim of that, and this movie deserved so much more.
You did.
Yep, it did.
So a story, it's actually based off a book, and it's about a civil war that rages in Africa, and Andre Alba is a warlord, and basically he takes in a young orphan, and he has him join the guerrilla soldiers. But the movie is so much more than that. It is a really in-depth, almost personal journal into this young child's head that's just basically out to survive and thrown into pretty much every horrific scenario you could ever imagine in war, from rape to murder, I mean, to genocide, as we're discussing on this topic. I mean, and it's all, you know, intertwined in his own personal thoughts, which, you know, are expressed throughout the film. And this film, you know, it's so interesting because it's obviously filmed in the Congo, and it's filmed in a part of Africa, but they never, in the book, they don't ever say where it's at, and which is interesting because you don't need to know, because you automatically know.
Yeah.
And it's such a horrific take on child soldiers and how this plays out in the world. But this film took me 3 sittings to watch because of how brutal it honestly is. especially the scene where they're hacking people with machetes, and he gives that quote about being beasts of no nation, which is of course the title of the film. I mean, it is like wow. It really, really, really will take you back. Steve, I know you've seen this film because I've raved about it to you. What do you think about Beast of no Nation?
This is another one. This is another film that maybe you can watch it twice. You know what I mean, depending on your stamina in the film, because this is a very it just leaves you very, like, it left me cold, kind of, especially when I get kind of personal with movies that take place in Central Africa, Northern African places where a lot of violence like this happens. It's just so brutal. You know what I mean? Like, and it's so, like, on a visceral level. Like we were talking, obviously the last film we were talking about the Holocaust and how that's also brutal, and they're similar but yet different as well. Just this, like, how disgustingly brutal it is, of like going from, we are not only going to, like, do something like you just said, Rob, like rape and kill and murder, but murder in the most like animalistic way possible. Because it's just one thing to kill a person, but then, like, hack them up with a machete, which is another quote in another film we'll talk about, which they have said, like, that's like possibly one of the worst ways to go. And to subject a child, so, a child's innocent, they don't know anything, and to basically, have a child psychologically turn into a monster, and that's all they know is the brutality. It's a very powerful, but yet very, for all lack of a better term, disgusting film to watch.
Yeah. Luke, what do you think about Beast of No Nation?
Yeah, I loved when it first came out, and this was actually, and as a broader show, this was one of the first, I feel like, Netflix movies. This was one of the first, because they did a limited theatrical release, but this was the first movie that, like, was released on Netflix. This had a decent budget. This had Idris Elba. This was taken seriously. This was supposed to be like, this is Netflix's chance at making a movie, which nowadays is much more common. But back then, even just like, what was it? Like 7 years ago or so.
Right.
Back then, it was unprecedented. So the fact that this was their first shot is definitely a credit to next to the heads of Netflix at the time, that they chose this to be their risk. They chose this to, like, be their foot forward to being an actual proper film studio.
Right.
Yeah. The thing that always struck me with Beasts is, like, the humanity of the child soldiers. As brutal as it was, the motivations behind why they're doing it, the motivations behind Idris Elba's character, and the day to day as you exist in this world, how much it felt so, not necessarily relatable, but it was like this because it is such a different world that I'm even ever used to, something that hopefully many of our listeners will never necessarily have to experience, but something that felt that felt so relatable within the moment, within the characters and their humanity. It's for me, one of the most, like, striking moments was when Idris Elba turned into a pedophile, which I was like,
yeah,
dang, man. This is like, these kids do not get a break.
They don't deserve it,
all.
right?
Yeah, it's brutal.
Especially Agu, the main kid. He didn't deserve anything.
No.
I mean, he was just trying to live his life, and he basically gets thrown into this whole environment.
I would say, if there was one element that I wish that we had seen more of, and I was because I was so fascinated by it, it was when the kids, like, got out, when they left, and they
The
beat
brainwashing element.
Yeah, when they're out of it and they're in this orphanage and they're in a school, and like the kid is trying to like basically relearn how to be a human. Um, I would love if there was like I really wish there's a movie that like focuses on that element of like because
There
the
is,
kids
and we'll
get
get to
out
it next.
eventually they
Yeah.
like because where do you go from that point, like where do you like how do you walk away from living in hell for as long as you
Right.
have? It's like now you have to try to be in the world.
Yeah.
It's
Well, a movie I would think that would get very close to that, and it wasn't on the itinerary coming in here, but I know we've all seen it, and I feel like it should be mentioned now because we're already on the continent. So let's go ahead and bring it to light now, which is 2006's Blood Diamond. This one, of course, starred Leonardo DiCaprio,
yeah.
Jennifer Connelly, Digimon Hunsu, David Harwood, Arnold Vosloo. Not even gonna try and pronounce the young man, so I apologize for that. For those who have never seen this movie, you've been living under the rock, especially if you are a big movie buff, because this is a great film. The Civil War rages through 1999 Sierra Leone. Two men, a white and a South African mercenary, Leonardo DiCaprio, and a black Mende fisherman, Dejan Hasoon, become joined in a common quest to recover a rare gem that has the power to transform their lives with the help of an American journalist, Jennifer Connelly. The men embark on a hazardous trek through rebel territory to achieve their goal. But it's not just about that, because the main
Yeah.
character's son is also taken by the rebel leader and basically brainwashed, just like as you've seen in Beast of No Nation.
Yeah.
And it's just as brutal. You see how they do it by blindfolding them, having them shoot prisoners, and then taking it off so they know they've killed somebody. Heroin. But there's so much too that I want to emphasize to you, our audience, about this movie. Even though it is not directly in the genre of what we talk about, there is a big element to this movie that makes these kind of movies un- unfortunately possible, and that is the money that happens. And that was one of the biggest problems
Yeah.
in Sierra Leone, was the diamond industry, that
Mhm.
they were basically pretty much exploiting everything they could out of Africa, paying these warlords through diamonds and giving them weapons. I mean, even Lord of War, we've talked about that movie previously,
Yeah.
kind of touches base into that. And this is one of those films too that really kind of show the horror of the genocide, because the RAF, I believe the RUF, they were known as, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing them wrong, they're known as like an international terror organization by having their own trademark, by chopping off people's limbs, because they would go through Africa when they basically took over the government and they said people couldn't vote. They were cutting off their arms. So they're an international terror organization with their own trademark, which is
Yeah.
insane.
That's crazy to me. That's just insane.
But Blood Diamond is one of those movies too that maybe not as brutal as Beast of No Nation. In the long run, it starts out pretty heavy too. I mean, it is a no holds bar in the beginning when they first raid the village.
This is more of the, I would say, more of the Hollywood version of a Beast of No Nations.
Right.
Beast of No Nation had a little bit more of a leash because of the Netflix backing behind that, and it wasn't relegated to just going through the movie industry, through the
Yeah.
theaters, but it still had the impact at the time because this was 2006, so there was really nothing on that market at that time that was this visceral. And I kind of remember after this film, a lot of movies started trying to go this route as well. There was a lot of films where they were trying to be like, this
Focus
movie
on
takes
Africa too.
yeah, it's taking place in the Congo. This one takes place in Vietnam again. There was a lot of those things, and a lot of the going back over to central parts of Asia and like third world countries. So this was an interesting one that, again, kind of got brushed aside. Like no one really, when they talk about Leonardo DiCaprio films, they don't bring this one up too much.
Luke, what do you think about Blood Diamond?
It's okay.
You just think it's okay?
Yeah, no, like there were I also remembered was it Empire of the Sun, the Bruce Willis.
Yes.
I just like we
Yeah.
don't need to we can do less movies where it's like the white dude has to save all the Africans. It's
Yeah.
Okay.
it's got
Fair
weird
enough.
stuff.
I'm
It's got weird
glad.
drugs.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Luke.
Yeah,
I'm
it's got
so glad you brought that up. Hold on, give me 2 seconds. Um, I want to talk about why we have our audience here on this subject, where Leonardo DiCaprio was actually from, because that is so interesting. Because was he really African? Because you can make the argument he was from Rhodesia.
What was with the accent?
Yeah, but for those of you who don't know what Rhodesia was, it was an unrecognized state in southern Africa from 1965 to 1979, and it was in the territory of which he even states was Zimbabwe. This place, though, which is interesting, was a white colony that tried to stay segregated within Africa, and they fought literally to the bitter end to try and keep that idea alive.
Yeah.
And it's so crazy because he actually mentions this piece of history in this movie. So even though I completely agree with you on that, Luke, there is a sense of history in this movie itself from kind of what we're talking about, too, the apartheid, the oppression that has been taking place in some corners of the world that just never really go recognized, which is what unfortunately gives a candidate to make films like these.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to go ahead and take a break real quick, our audience, and we'll be right back.
Yeah. Falling into love hurts just as much as falling out of it. But I'll scrape my knees and scar my shins. I hope you never doubted that I'm down for you. Wanna hit the town, make it loud, be a clown for you. Or maybe we could be a Romeo and Juliet, except without the age difference, and we can forget the death. Cause this is love at first sight, there's no doubt in my mind. And darling, forget about the time, cause you're mine. And I'll spend every second chilling with you. Like this, that vintage Nickelodeon innocence love. Innocence the type of if we fight, let's chill and make up. You're one in a million pay stubs, but to me you're like a lottery. There's a lot of fish in the sea, but you're a catch that's so startling. Baby, I know that there's a lot to do, it's awful too. And in your past there's a lot to chew. I'll buckle up.
Welcome back, all our listeners, for this very heavy Real Sharks episode. We're talking about films that depict the unfortunate trait in humanity known as genocide, atrocities committed across the world in various types, and we're talking about the films that actually depict them. So the next film we're going to get into, while we're staying on the continent of Africa, is one of the films that I would say is another one of the best films I've ever seen. Got this man many recognitions, and that is Hotel Rwanda, starring Don Cheadle, from 2004. The story of Hutu Paul Resimon Ghana, I'm sorry if I butchered that, manages the hotel Des Mills, sorry if I butchered that too. He lives a happy life with his Tutsi wife and their 3 children, but when Hutu military forces initiate a campaign of ethnic cleansing against the Tutsi minority, Paul is compelled to allow refugees to take shelter in his hotel. As the UN pulls out, Paul must struggle alone to protect the Tutsi refugees in the face of escalating violence known as the Rwanda Genocide. This was directed by Terry George. Man, this movie is heavy.
Yeah.
in a really
Super heavy.
really great film with Don Cheadle. I mean, this is probably the film that I love him for the most.
Yeah. Me too.
His character in this by far is one of the best. And it didn't just have Don Cheadle. It had Sophie Okonedo, Nick Nolite, Joaquin Phoenix was in this too.
Yeah.
Hakeem Kazman, Desmond Dubé. Man, it's in a way it's like it's like Schindler's List. It's about a guy that goes around doing everything he can to try and save these people from the horrific things that are going outside the walls of this hotel, because he can see what's going on. And it's a very heartfelt film when you see the depictions, because the event of the Rwanda genocide is pretty much known. Also, many people don't know, is Africa's World War. I mean, this was a lot of things that happened with, this also took place around the same time with Sierra Leone. All this stuff kind of coincide with itself.
With all that stuff, yeah.
And, and unfortunately, a lot of innocent people were massacred.
Yeah.
Ethnic cleansed because they were different.
Mm-hmm.
Had a different religion, different belief.
Different belief that was not really as they depicted, I guess, not foreign to the country. Well, foreign to the country, and it's seen as traitors.
Right.
So the way that they depicted it was, it had to be a cleansing to get rid of the filth out of the country. and they were slaughtering everyone. And most specifically, what made it so brutal was children,
Right.
because they wanted to get rid of the next generation. So they was trying to get rid of all the children as much as possible.
And of course, as Luke pointed out too, I used to machetes is what was used a lot in this movie to kill a lot of people.
And the crazy thing about it, this movie is so this Hotel Rwanda is probably one that I've seen 3 times, but I'll never see it again, just because even more so than Schindler's List. You know what I mean? Just because of what you were saying with the whole machete thing. It was even brutal than that. Like, they didn't even depict dogs being used, people being eaten alive by dogs, people being fed their children and husbands. This is probably one of the most brutal things that we've seen in this modern age, because it happened in the 90s, I believe 94. So yeah, this is a brutal film.
Luke, how do you feel about Hotel Rwanda?
It's a good film, yeah, and one of Don Cheadle's finest. It does take a lot of cues from Schindler's List, in that, like, Cheadle's initial decision to do this. There's a little bit of self-interest in there as well. That he almost, where he tends, where at first there's a reluctance to it as well. To he's worried if this is going to get him fired. That's the chief of his concern. But of course, his wife is a Tutsi, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So of course that naturally bleeds into the story as it goes on. And so this is, again, very heavy, very and I would say also very illuminating. I suspect many people who didn't follow the news in the 90s would not be too familiar with the Rwandan genocide. And it's not talked about a lot now today, honestly. It was extremely brutal, but I think, most Americans would not be aware of the scale of it. And really the kind of failure of the West in it.
Right.
Yeah, dude.
Just like Blood Diamond.
Yep.
Blood Diamond. It's, let's be very, very clear. This is not the first time the West has looked, and it's not you look at us right now. The U.S. and its allies have a pretty consistent track record of looking the other way when actual human rights violations are going on. Despite
I love that you're bringing that up, Luke, because I wanted to kind of bring something up here, and this is where the show was going to get heavy. We hear a lot sometimes, and I've always wanted to kind of address this, because as we're talking about these films such as Rwanda, Beast of No Nations, these African films, you always hear that saying by some people that, shithole countries. Well, it's like, these countries wouldn't be such shitholes if you wouldn't hold them down so much. It's not about them trying to prosper on their own. It's about the West and the other countries holding these places down to exploit their resources. That's all it's ever been about. It's keep them poor so we can take as much as we can from them. A lot of people don't know that they killed Patrice Lumumba, the first elected president in the Congo, to install a dictator, just so they can get all the resources for their planes in Vietnam. I mean, this is well-known things, and it's like, the West will turn its back on these countries, and then you'll hear ridicule about why are these places like so bad like that. It's because they're on the lower totem pole of society and history. It's like, no, that's not the case at all.
Yeah, but when you're being funded, basically the massacre, and it's given to your country that's already a third world country that has nothing, and they're taking everything from you, like you're saying, Rob, and then you get nothing. You get murderers, you get thieves, you get monsters, and then when that takes more of a hold on the rest of the world, where they go, look what's going on in the Congo, look what's going on here. It's like, well, there's a reason to these problems. There's always a root to these issues, and it doesn't start with people just uprising and killing people. In all of these films, there's always an issue. There's always a core to these issues. And like Luke and you, Rob, have said in this film, it does not paint the West in any way, shape, or form in a good light, where there have been many, many pleas, not just in the film, but around the genocide as a whole, and they just completely ignored it because they were like, there's nothing to gain from it. Why
Yeah,
help?
there's no benefit to it.
Yeah.
There's no.
Right. So the next film I want to mention is going to be an interesting one because it's kind of a case study, my audience, into how not to depict one of these films. This movie is an interesting one, and I'm going to kind of break it down for you here, my audience. It's called Salvador, 1986. This starred James Woods, and it was directed by Oliver Stone. Also starred Jim Belushi, Michael Murphy, John Savage, and Tony Plana. It's the story. Basically, the synopsis of this film is unable to find work in America because of his persistent boozing and drugs. Photojournalist Richard Boyle, James Woods, heads to El Salvador with his friend DJ Dr. Rock, James Belushi, to see if he can get a gig covering the country's ongoing civil war. Boyle decides it's time to flee the country when the violence escalates to a level that even he is uncomfortable with. But his relationship with an El Salvadorian woman complicates matters. Ladies and gentlemen, this film is interesting because this is the first Uncut Gems. It really is. It is James Woods at his most James Woods. I mean, pretty much. And when I say it's like Uncut Gems is because it is about a character who is absolutely slimy.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a character, and the reason I said this is a case study on how not to do these films, because I would like to point out too, and I'm going to hit him where it hurts. Oliver Stone once depicted this in a documentary about America, in which he showed that this was the film to demonstrate genocide. Well, this film is not about that. It's more or less about a piece of shit that's exploiting this country, exploiting all the natives in it, getting all the money, and he's just a piece of trash. And the only time he even cares about anything is when it is about this woman that he loves this point in time in his life to try and get her across in America.
Right.
But beyond that, he never learns a lesson, and that's what I thought this film was, because it was actually decent when you're watching it, but then when you soon realize he's just a piece of shit from point A to point B. There is no in between no redemption of this character. So much so when he's talking to Jim Belushi about going down to El Salvador to get him to go because he's such a piece of shit. He has no money. Basically, he's like, "Come on, man, let's go down there. You can get a little 16-year-old girl for a fair price." And he's like, "Really? That sounds like a good idea." And that's like one of the motivations he goes down there.
Yeah. And that I'm glad that you said that, man, because this is one of those ones where it is, again, like the galvanized sort of representation of like, let's make a movie based off of genocide and war crimes and basically the visceral side of humanity. But let's also shove a romantic point in it that does not
somewhat romantic.
He does somewhat. And again, the man doesn't learn his lesson because he tries to get an El Salvadorian woman and her child out because it suits him and his needs. It's not about like, let me go ahead and see, oh my God, I'm reporting on this and I'm affected by what I'm seeing. He was just like, well, I want to get out now, and then I have a thing with her, so let me get her out. So it really is funny that you said that this is a very James Woodsy performance, because he is just a slime ball. There is no like, he learns his lesson. But like, what do you gain out of this type of film? Like, I know this is back in the 80s, 86, by the way. But it's still, I don't understand why make a film like this.
It is kind of confusing.
It's like, why make a film though, Rob? Why make it this visceral with something that's like so real and raw for people to this very day, and then have something so dumb? And then at the end of the film, the ending was stupid too. I didn't like the ending.
Right, he gets caught. They get caught. For spoilers, everybody. They get caught, and she gets deported. It is actually based on a real person too, unfortunately. Yeah. I didn't go that deep into it because I was like, this movie, I enjoyed it. If I was watching it because I love James Woods, I would like it. But watching it to get like a depiction of what was taking place at the time, like a period piece, as Oliver Stone has cited this movie to be, and kind of try to emphasize it to be, wow, it was terrible. Like one of the worst films I've ever seen to depict something so horrific. I mean, Jojo Rabbit does a better job of depicting something that is real within the Holocaust than this film did to depict the genocide of the Salvadoran Civil War.
Yeah. Well, at least Jojo Rabbit had a spin take that, you know, was, yes, controversial, like as this film was trying to be, I guess, but like at least there was a point to Jojo Rabbit. There was no real point here. He just goes there because he's a sleazeball.
To exploitate it. I mean,
so there's really no gain.
That's why I said it's like Uncut Gems. It really is. It's about a guy who doesn't really learn his lesson.
Yeah.
Same exact scenario.
Because that, I mean, he didn't learn his lesson in that film either. It was really about what's going on in Sierra Leone, and like there was different parts where they were cutting, and it's the same way here. It's just when I watched it, when you were like, "Hey, watch this film," and I watched it, I was like, "What? I don't feel anything. Like I feel bad about what happened, but I'm like, I don't care about these guys."
Right. So let's go ahead and finish it up with the next movie we're going to talk about, which is Killing Fields, 1984. New York Times reporter Sidney Skemberg Sam Watterson is on assignment covering the Cambodian Civil War with the help of a local interpreter, Dinth Prawn, and an American photojournalist, Al Rockoff, John Malkovich. When the U.S. Army pulls out amid escalating violence, Skemberg makes an exit arrangements for Prawn and his family. Prawn, however, tells Skemberg that he intends to stay in Cambodia to help cover the unfolding story, a decision he may regret as Khmer Rogue rebels move in. Guys, this is also another brutal film.
Yeah.
I love John Malkovich, though. I mean, who doesn't love John Malkovich in this anything? I'll let you guys go ahead and take this film. It's been a long time actually since I've seen it. So, but from what I remember of it, I only needed to see it one time.
Yeah, it's one of those. Yeah. It's one of those.
So, Steve, I know you had a good take on this film.
Yeah, so this is around the mid 70s, I believe. 74, 75 is when it's supposed to take place, and I believe it has to deal with this reporter that wants to go ahead and again cover the Cambodian war that was happening, the Civil War, and he had this interpreter who was also Cambodian, and this other guy with him that was helping him out. And when and he was under the I think the protection of the U.S. And then when they were leaving, he was kind of scared for his interpreter, so he I believe him and he was trying to stay in Cambodia to help out his interpreter. Mm-hmm. But this is around the time where Pol Pot was reigning terror, and it's a nasty film. I don't know what else to say.
The bones in that scene where he's on the river.
Which is
crazy.
Which is real, by the way. That is a real thing that happened. There was bones there and of real people, because it was one of the worst genocides in human history. Pol Pot's the killing fields, and it's just disgusting. It's another one of these things of where I think this one gets it right and El Salvador gets it wrong is because you get the foreigner, kind of similar. Right? It's similar because you get the foreigner going over, right? And he understands what he's looking at, he understands what's happening. Yes, I mean he's a reporter, and it's similar to that fact, but he's helping out a person just like James Woods is helping out somebody. But the brutality, I felt hit a lot harder here. This film was also driving home a point of we need you to understand the brutality. It's not just it's not a visual thing, but we're gonna instill it into you like a Schindler's List of just how nasty and brutal this is, and how hopeless people feel, and the scenario of once this film ends, and again, I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it, but at the end of the film, there is still a sense of hope, as Luke has said earlier on the episode, that a lot of these films depict hope. There's a lot of hopelessness surrounded by the bubble of something of hope, right? Because you have to have hope in the worst case scenarios. But then also sometimes things just don't turn out right. You know what I mean? Like, you can't save everyone.
Right.
So that's kind of my take on The Killing Fields. It's a very powerful film.
Luke, do you have a take on The Killing Fields?
Oh, I haven't seen that one yet. I probably should, but yeah.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So some people might be saying, like, wow, why have you guys decided to do these set of films? Usually Real Sharks is very funny. You guys usually do, different films. Well, we wanted to kind of take a stand here tonight, ladies and gentlemen, and kind of tell people, like, these movies exist because there are some things in this world that there's nothing to debate. When it's genocide, it's genocide. When it's people doing ethnic cleansing, moving people out of their homes, killing for religious reasons, these movies exist to show people who can never possibly be in those other people's shoes what it is to go through that. And because you can never really put yourself in that environment, this is the next best thing you have. And some of those things are not debatable. So when I'm going to point to some of these movies and say, this is genocide. This is genocide. This is genocide, and what is happening in Israel right now to the Palestinians is genocide. There is no other way to explain it. The depictions are there. And as a host, that peddles in movie criticism and that has seen so many films, I'm kind of shocked at the debate on the world stage whether what's going on is actually debatable. When you have a litany of proof in history that what's going on for all the wrong reasons. And that's my take on that.
Yeah.
You guys have anything you want to add? Please add.
Yeah. No,
I don't think
I
there's
agree,
anything else
man.
to say.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. And this is why these films are so powerful and will continue to be powerful. And movies will be made. They will continue to be made just like this because there will just never be a stop to, tragedies against humanity and genocides and attempts of coups of ethnic cleansing.
But we make these to remind people of what is right and what is wrong. Mm-hmm. And there just seems to be this loss emphasis in the shock value right now of what is right and wrong.
Yeah, especially today, because these films, again, we were talking about are from yesteryear. A lot of these films are from 80s, 90s, even early or mid 2000s.
Look at the years they talk about. World War II,
mm-hmm.
the 70s, the 60s.
The 60s, and it's in the 90s even. Like I said, it's
how much more do you need before the proof is there? How much more do you need?
Yeah, especially when it's happening in real time and you can see it. It's not like it
will
was
one day watch a movie about what's going on right now. Mm-hmm. We will be watching a movie one day about it. And I swear I will be there to watch everyone talk about how horrific that movie depicts it and how they wish they could have stopped it. And the movie itself was so, it's like you could have stopped it then.
Yeah.
But you didn't.
Yeah.
So thank you, everybody, for this episode of the Real Sharks podcast. We hope you've enjoyed it. This is your host, Rob, with his co-hosts, Steve and Luke.
Peace.
And we want to say from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, please listen, like, and subscribe, and catch us wherever podcasts are broadcast. Make sure you catch us on Pod Nation TV. Make sure you catch our friends, such as the Happy Hour podcast on Pod Nation TV. And make sure you help us out in the algorithm and like and leave a comment. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night.
Great episode, guys.
Good episode.
Yeah.
Great episode.